All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Nathan Aswell. Welcome to another episode of Small Steps, Big Life. And it's my great pleasure today to be speaking to my friend Mark Helpsmeet. Mark is in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I don't know how good your French is, Mark, but being from Quebec, Eau Claire means clear water, which is, of course, you must know.
C'est merveilleux. En fait, c'est tout à fait super.
Wow, tu peux pas français. I didn't know that. That's great.
Well, actually, the French, I became fluent in it when I lived in Africa, when I was Peace Corps volunteer back 1,000 years ago, or about 40 years ago.
Wow.
So I became fluent, and I've just kept my fluency.
Wow, excellent. Well, so much to learn about you. So Mark is someone who's based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I know Mark because 5 years ago he interviewed me on his station at Northern Spirit Radio, and we're going to speak today about Mark's journey. So here we are. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathan. It's a pleasure. And folks, I interviewed him 5 years ago, but just a month ago or so, I interviewed him again. There was so much to catch up on.
Indeed. And I'm delighted to be able to switch roles with you, good sir. Give you a chance to relax.
I don't know. I mean, usually isn't the doctor the one who feels in control, and the patient is the one who feels this could go anywhere. I'm not in control, which is a good thing, right?
I promise I won't hurt. and I promise my rates are good.
And I also want to note right up front that somehow we color coordinated here our shirts. I just think that's absolutely wonderful. Were you reading my mind, or was I reading yours?
That's because purple is the color of divinity, and I actually wear purple all the time for my show because it's my favorite color.
Well, and likewise, didn't you know this? And all of my brothers and sisters, particularly over the years, have given me purple gifts because it's special. Ever since my junior year in high school, when I decided that purple was the perfect color of freedom, royalty, and therefore gypsies.
Huh.
That's somehow it came into my mind, and purple has been everywhere. In fact, I don't know how many people you know who have purple underdrawers.
I wouldn't know that, actually. I'll have to conduct my own survey and get back to you on that.
Okay, I'll wait.
So, Mark, tell us about your journey. Northern Spirit Radio is your passion. Is it your station? Is it something you run or call on with other people?
Northern Spirit Radio is something that I founded, and there's a board of directors now, Northern Spirit Radio, and there's other people who I work with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you'd say it's my baby. It was the leading that I was following. Mm-hmm. I tend to speak in Quaker speak, and if I need to translate to some other language, let me know. I try and be aware of that as I speak to the wider world. Mm-hmm. Let's go back way back, because when I was in ninth grade, I was an introvert, mm-hmm. or at least that's how everybody classified me. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I think in 10th grade, something shifted for me, and I can mention a few things that I know were part of the difference. Mm-hmm. One of them was, I think that was the year that I truly decided I like people. I found people interesting. And that makes all the difference, because every person that I meet now, I think there's something interesting there. What can I find? How can I invite it out? How can I make room for it? That kind of thing. And that really started when I was in 10th grade. Mm-hmm. So, I was just coming up right around 16. Mm-hmm. And amongst the things that helped me to have the confidence to do this is I got involved in debate. Mm-hmm. And so as a regular high school activity, and that made me more focused in terms of the things of the mind that I did with communication. I started learning about what was said and what wasn't said and how it was said. That helped a lot. Mm-hmm. Gave me confidence, and it gave me a place outside my home. In my home, by the way, I grew up in a family with 12 kids. Wow. I'm one of the top 4 out of 12.
One of the top 4, you're not sure where?
I'm because I have stepbrothers and sisters and half sisters. It's kind of more complicated, but I have two step siblings older than I am. I have a sister who's older. So I used to be second line. Now I'm fourth. And then I've got a lot younger. My mom died when I was 9. So then the family changed and all that kind of thing when I was 9 and 10 years old. And I would say that it's a pretty messed up home. And when I say that, I don't mean that any of the people was lacking in goodness, but it certainly was dysfunctional in a lot of ways, including alcoholism and other misbehaviors that didn't help things run well. So when I got involved in debate and I had this group of friends and these activities and developing my mind, it was a great aid to me, and I became a little bit of an overnight people decided I was an extrovert, which was really quite strange for those people who knew me both before and after. And I have friends that encompass that change. So I mentioned that as part of it. Then I've been involved in science and math and all those kinds of things. Those are a big part of my studies. When I went to university, I had a triple major.
Wow.
So I had a math major, I had a physics major, which actually became a computer science physics major, and I had a speech communications major. And that one seems like the odd one out in the series. But again, I'm so interested in the world and in people. They're both very interesting. They're different spheres to some degree. But math and science, I had always thought was the practical solution. That's the place where people are going to want to hire you, because you can make their computer work, or because you can calculate whatever funds they need to make a living and so on. The speech communication thing, I had always thought it would be wonderful to be able to be part of speaking and hearing and listening and communicating as a living, but it was maybe the less obvious of my skills or attributes than that. So that's all back in the 1970s that all that happened. I graduated from college. A year later, I went in the Peace Corps, was living in West Africa. So Togo was the country that I had a rich experience in for 2 years. Learned French, that became fluent in French, and much more. I learned a lot about myself. Actually, I had probably the biggest, of the first 25 years of my life, the biggest spiritual experience at that time. I had an amazing period, followed by a couple months of really living in an altered state.
Please tell us more about it. I'd love to hear about that.
There were actually a couple things that happened, and I think I'm going to keep that one brief, but what I would say is I had a dear friend, woman I was very much in love with, who, because of medical problems, had to very suddenly leave Togo. She went home, and she'd been a spiritual person. She was and we talked about that and we shared stuff about that, but I still think I was only on the surface. I was, just here, and there were so many depths I could have dived to, but I didn't. And after she left, I read a journal that she kept. I had to pack up all her things and send it to her. And in that, I heard things that she had said to me, but I saw her speaking with the divine, with God, what many different names were. And all of a sudden, I saw that I had been just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And it transformed me, broke me open in a tremendous way. And let me mention one other experience I had at that point. I was walking home. I lived in a village, no electricity, no running water, that kind of thing. I was walking home one night, and you can know how bright the stars are when you're far from any of human light pollution. I was walking home and stars were vibrant above me. And I had just a few seconds of simultaneous out-of-body experience and in-body experience. And at the same time, I saw myself on the earth as I felt myself on the earth, but I also saw things from the galactic perspective. What I saw was, well, galactic is too small. I saw that I was this person, but I was a speck in this country called Togo, which is a speck on the continent of Africa, which is a speck on the planet Earth, which is a speck in the solar system, which is a speck in the galaxy that we're part of, which is a speck in the universe that we're part of. And I saw it from the universal mind's position. In this moment, I was seeing myself, and I could see how infinitesimal I was. And at the same time, I knew I could see that I was known. I mattered. I was part of it. You might be tempted to use the word loved, but it's maybe something more powerful than what we call love. Could see that I was an integral part of everything in the vast universe, and I was that tiny little piece. And that doesn't mean that I'm different than anyone else. It's one of my favorite sayings is, you are a unique and irreplaceable individual, just like every other person on this planet.
That's great.
And it's true. And I experienced that, though. I didn't think it. I had that. So turning points for me, a deep place of spiritual transformation began there. And it's continued throughout my life. Got back to the United States and got another bachelor's degree. I already had one. Got another bachelor's degree and taught some physics at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Got a job computer programming to put myself through that second degree and continued in that work. And actually, I still have that business that I started when I moved up to Eau Claire in the end of the 80s. And so I've done this computer programming consulting work through a long period because it's important to people and they're willing to pay for it and it gives a livelihood, but I've never considered it my life calling.
Right.
In 1999, I was away from my work for a few weeks because I went to New Zealand, part of the Quaker folk dance group that I'm part of, and had a wonderful time doing that ministry of international peace building and building of community. And on the plane heading back to the United States, I could feel my anxiety raising. It was growing, and I had just read The Story of B, if you know what that is. Ishmael, the story about spoiler alert, the telepathic gorilla who's trying to help humanity save itself. If you haven't read it, I know you will love that book.
Well, you know what? And, please tell me how to. I'll make a point of including a link to it after this.
Ishmael is the first book in the series.
Okay.
I should be able to say the author's name, but I can't. His second book was called The Story of B, and B is the letter B. Okay. And then he had a following book called My Ishmael. And his name will come to me when I'm not thinking of it. But there's a story that many people have told or shared or heard since then. You know, it's about how you put a frog. If you put a frog in water that's boiling, it'll fight like crazy to get out. Right. But that if you put it in and just slowly raise the temperature, the frog will stay there and not realize it's being killed, pickled, boiled. Right. And as I was flying back in, I realized, since I had been out of the waters, that I was going back into boiling waters for me, stuff that was inimical to the life of my very being. So it really begins a significant step in my process was having been removed from the environment, moving back into it and saying, uh-oh, this is not healthy. This is not good. This is not right. I need to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in 1999. And in I think it was 5 days later or something, it was within a week, I had the realization that I could simply choose to change. I realized that, say if my business had collapsed, it burned down, it was gone, or something to that sort, if in some way my business had closed down, I would go out and retrain or find another job or change myself. So I had the realization that, I in my mind, I'm thinking it's difficult to make the transition, but in fact, if the situation was different, it would be just so obvious and I'd just start walking. So I made the decision that within 1 year, I would find what I'm really called to do and the work I'm really meant to do, and I would go to it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do that. I was clear at the moment, going back into the boiling water and so on. Mm-hmm. But like many great intentions, it didn't fully form and take place in my life. But I talked to people about it, and I've got several wonderful circles of people who helped me be aware. Mm-hmm. I'm part of 2 different men's groups that I attend weekly. Mm-hmm. I'll be going to one a little bit later tonight. Mm-hmm. I'm part of Quaker Meeting, which has its own level of intention. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's other friends that are not part of any of those particular formal groups that help me stay conscious and stay rooted. Mm-hmm. My wife, and one of those best partnerings I ever was fortunate to choose is that of my wife. Mm-hmm. Sandra is her name. Mm-hmm. And Sandra, she helped me remember, even when I was distracted by or my attention was dulled from things. So she started helping me do some searching. Mm-hmm. And we did some exploration of various ways that I might have thought of going. Those didn't materialize. And then coming up into 2005, she suggested and arranged for me to have what in Quaker circles is called a clearness committee. Mm. I don't know where, and maybe I should ask you more things, Nathan, about how you get your ideas developed and who you bounce things off of. But a clearness committee is one technique, and it's really one that the world would deserve to use more. Parker Palmer, I don't know if you've heard of his 7 or so books. One of his books was instrumental in also getting me on my path, but he's written several wonderful, wonderful books about discernment, about finding the way forward. And you can look and find his story, but clearness committees he specifically talks about. So a clearness committee is a group of people who agree to meet with you to help you with discernment. Mm-hmm. In original Quaker experience, what happened was they had to discern, did you want to join and be part of the Quaker meeting, or did you really want to go into marriage? Those were 2 things that were done first, membership and marriage. And over the last 50, 70 years, they've been used much more widely. And in my case, the question is, what am I called to be and do in my life? What's my work that I'm meant to do? And that's what the Clearness Committee was welcome to. And unlike most groups where you try and maybe get advice, people tend to give advice, well, you've got good skills in this. Maybe you should try that. Right. That is not a Clearness Committee.
So what's the difference? Tell us about the difference. This is great.
A Clearness Committee sits with you and asks you questions, reflecting things back to you. And they serve as a witness. and they serve as an invitation. But again, without giving advice, the questions that they ask should be always open-ended. So, for instance, the question is, well, you're pretty good at folk dancing. Have you ever considered being a folk dance professional? That's not open-ended.
Right.
Now, a question about my folk dancing is, there might be, which things do you feel particular passion about? I know you as a folk dancer. Are there other things that, and where does that fit in your universe of excitement, of passion, of leading, of opening?
Yeah.
So the clearness committee sat with me, and at the same time, the universe was working very well. There was a low-power FM radio station opening up in Eau Claire, or moving toward it, and they were doing brainstorming. And someone from that station, they had been doing some brainstorming about what kind of programming they'd include. And someone was saying, well, what should we have on Sundays? Well, Sundays usually have something religious or spiritual. And, people said, yeah, but we don't want any Bible thumpers on there, or kind of typical reaction. And someone said, well, yeah, but there's a lot of good social action coming out of spirituality. And Mark Helpsmeet is known as a peace activist locally. Maybe he'd do a program, spirituality and activism. First time they came to me, suggested that, I said, I've got enough on my plate, not interested. But they came back to me, and a particular person came back to me a few months later when I was sitting with my clearness committee. And he said, Mark, this is something we want. It's really important. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to support you, to get you to do this, because I know that that's where it's called. Now, this person, Paul by name, he's part of a local Baptist church, an American Baptist church, which people think of as conventional religion. American Baptists tend to be on the liberal end of Baptists. He'd been environmentalist and activist for a number of years himself. He, the fact that he stepped forward was especially helpful. When the messages come from unexpected quarters, I know at that point that's time for me to tune up my ears a little bit. So a combination of the sitting with the clearness committee, input from Paul, and that's what led me to do the first of my radio programs, Spirit in Action. And I was also formed by something else I had seen happening, and I'm not quite sure what your perspective is on this, Nathan, but and a lot of our listeners may see otherwise. I think community is so very essential.
I agree.
It's crucial, and most of us in the Western world have been very tempted away from community. Now, mind you, I had those years of living in Togo in West Africa. People are supportive to each other in a deeper way than we can imagine here. And have you traveled much, Nathan? I really don't.
I'm traveling more and more, but please tell us more about that. I just got back from Bali, so that's very much in my mind. Just
right,
gift that it is to be in a different part of the world and experience a different outlook on how to live your day-to-day life. So I can relate very much to that, but I've never been to Togo, so please tell us more about how that has continued to influence you, as it obviously has.
Sure. Well, part of what I witnessed there is people counting on each other, in part because they don't have the physical things. And I became aware over the years that when you have, if I have a car and if I have money, I can run to the store and buy something. If I don't have those things, then working together with my neighbors, working together with my friends, I can synthesize something. It might be a shared possession. As a matter of fact, just this week, one of my friends locally said, would you like to be part of 5 of us or 6 of us going together? For $500, we're going to buy this old pickup truck. And if you need to haul something like in a pickup truck, we will be joint owners in it. So no one has to foot it all, and we don't have to have 5 different trucks. We can have 5 people sharing one because we only need it once every few weeks, months, or something. In Togo, they know that and they live that. Mm-hmm. And they depend on each other in a way that most of us, what we really depend upon is our material possessions. And probably corporations, the stores or whoever provides us. And we might depend on government or various permutations of that. What I saw in Togo was people knowing each other and caring about each other very deeply. And then it wasn't until many years later that I actually read a book. It was a collection of the Second International Luddite Conference, which was held in, I don't know, the 1980s, 1990s. And there was a story in there by an Amishman. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to lay out some of the grounds on which their community is built. Mm-hmm. They have some very conscious decisions. And many people think of Amish as refusing all technologies, but it's not a blanket thing. Mm-hmm. In fact, they are perfectly willing to consider a technology, but they have litmus tests that it has to pass, criteria. And when he said in his particular Amish community, one of the questions that they ask themselves as a group before deciding to adopt or not adopt a piece of technology is, if we adopt this technology, will it enhance or detract from our sense of community?
Wonderful question.
And he gave a very concrete example. Mm-hmm. He says the old style grain threshers, they're not electric powered or steam powered or anything. They just, someone's turning them, someone's feeding it, someone's unloading it. It takes a number of people to do this. And so when you do something, use a piece of machinery like that, you have to bring together a number of people. So you have to bring in your neighbors. Right. When it's harvest time, when it's bring them all in. Mm-hmm. And it affects how one thinks about one's neighbors when you know that when that time of year comes around, mm-hmm. you're going to need your neighbors. So he said that the newer version only takes a couple people to run.
Right.
Shall we adopt that? And they made the decision not to use the newer type because it would mean that if you didn't need your neighbors, the next time your neighbor did something annoying, and that's pretty much a human condition, yeah. We get annoyed at one thing or another. You might be tempted to mistreat them or diss them or in some ways alienate them. He said we didn't want to do that, so we decided to do that, live in such a way as to make sure that community is fostered. Mm-hmm. Come back to my situation. I've seen our nation, and I'll talk about the United States, mm-hmm. where I live. Mm-hmm. I assume it's got parallels in most Western countries. Mm-hmm. But we've been tempted to move further and further away from community and interdependence. Mm-hmm. If I need something to cook a meal, I will tend to go to the store. I could go to a neighbor and knock on the door and say, can I borrow a cup of sugar? That kind of thing. But I don't know when the last time any of our listeners have done that, or when you've done that, Nathan. Do you know last time you did it?
Couldn't tell.
I can tell you sometime in the last year I did with one of our neighbors, that kind of a request.
Hmm.
So anyway, I was aware that there's a building of community that we need to do, and I love spirituality of all textures.
Mm-hmm.
I identify as a Quaker, but that doesn't limit me theologically at all. I certainly come from a Christian basis. I've certainly studied and tried to draw on all the strengths of spirituality across the board, including animism, as they would call it in Togo, mm-hmm. and so on. And those things have enriched me. But there's a place where community and spirituality intersect, and sometimes that fairly is named religion. And that's as in the ancient, the religion, the word comes from religio, the old Latin word. It means to bind up or to make whole. Mm. Religio.
Nice.
So spirit connection that binds up and makes us whole together. Of course, we all know that there's plenty of religion that doesn't do a very good job of that. So or at least I don't see it in the same way. But I was aware that we needed something to help us work together well to do the healing of the world. And that's the purpose, really, of Northern Spirit Radio. Come back to that. I saw how there are a number of people of really some profound spiritual work and insights, but who are also missing the piece about supporting, nurturing the connection that makes us powerful together. Mm-hmm. So I set that out as a purpose that was behind the founding of First Spirit in Action. I normally, in that program, talk about people who, in one way or another, are doing the work of healing the planet. Maybe it's peace or social justice or environmental, or so many different ways that we can make this world a better place. And a key question that I want to ask them each time is, what motivated you to do that work? And what supports you in doing that work? So that is, for me, a religious question, but I don't come to it with a pat answer. What I want to do is hear people's experience. So Spirit in Action was the first program I did, and then very shortly after I started one called Song of the Soul. There's a song that inspired me, Chris Williamson, Seek Out a Song of the Soul. And I'm so aware of how, and certainly you know this, Nathan, mm-hmm. being the person you are and all the people you connect with, mm-hmm. music has this power to do things in us and to connect us and teach us in ways that words and thoughts and logical constructs can't do. And hearing people's spiritual journeys through their music or as expressed in their music is just a wonder and a blessing to me. Yeah. So I wanted to sit with people and listen and hear and share the music of people doing that. I think that's one of the many ways that we heal and make this world a better place. Yeah, absolutely. So that's how that program came about. And those are both we're talking about the summer of 2005 mm-hmm. when I first started these programs. And I started them just here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin mm-hmm. on WHYS LP, a low power FM station here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go kind of in fast forward mode. There is a clearness committee, and then which became what we call an anchoring committee that was part of this transition for me, because then first the local Quaker meeting I'm part of, called Eau Claire Friends Meeting, I became a program, Northern Spirit Radio became a project, if you will, under the care of, and that's the language we use, under the care of the Quaker meeting.
Love it.
And that means, to some degree, they provide oversight, guidance. Mm-hmm. They provide support And some of it's been financial, and some of it's been to have people actually listening, caring about what I'm saying. And sometimes it's concrete, hey, there's this person doing that work. How about talking to them? Mm-hmm. Our Eau Claire Friends meeting is part of a larger group of Quakers called a yearly meeting. Northern Yearly Meeting is what it's called. Mm-hmm. So Northern Spirit Radio is affiliated with Northern Yearly Meeting. Mm-hmm. But also there's a secular activist, I guess it started pretty much as an environmental group called Northern Thunder. So there's a lot of Northerns floating around here. And so there became a group that's part of Northern Yearly Meeting that became my anchoring group for Northern Spirit Radio, and those circles have grown. My programs have also then become syndicated. Mm-hmm. So instead of just being local in the town where I live, first there were a couple other places in Wisconsin, and a place, Lopez Island, which is one of the San Juan Islands, not terribly far from you, Nathan. It was one of the first 5 or 6 places. Over in New Hampshire, Keene, New Hampshire was another place on the other side, and pretty soon scattered all around the country. There are places, at this point, about 25 stations that can carry the programs.
Great.
So I think I've kind of got you up.
It just fills me with joy to hear not only about Northern Spirit Radio and your passion for it, but just the way you have embraced or lived your desire to be in connection with. It's just, as you well know, both well know how we are influenced by a number of different things in our lives, which end up making us who we are right now. And to just hear, I love hearing threads that have not pulled together, but have just ended up influencing you and making you the person you are today, so that you are sharing yourself in this way with the world. It's beautiful stuff. I love hearing it.
Well, and it's fun. I mean, I don't do programs out of just, say, pure intellectual interest. I'm kind of vitally interested in the peace, social justice, environmental. Back at the very first the very first Earth Day, I was part of a presentation at our high school about that. And I've had roots in that all along. And some of the things I considered in those few years while I was still sorting out which direction I wanted to go, did I want to live as part of an eco-community? Because I knew community was important, and I know that care and connection with the earth is very important. So, of course, that finds its way into the programs I do, but not out of a simple, well, this is just something interesting, but it's out of something that's interesting that's close to my heart. Peace stuff. Of course, I was in the Peace Corps. The Vietnam War ended, well, let me see. We call it, in the United States, we call it the Vietnam War. In Vietnam, they call it the American War, right? The perspectives we have. They stopped drafting young men in the United States for engagement in that war that took place in Vietnam in 1972, which was the year I turned 18. So I never actually faced being drafted. But I had to ask myself questions about what I'd do if I was. And I was raised Catholic. I was not raised Quaker. So the kind of peace sensibility that's connected with Quakers was not what I was raised with. And I would not ever want to dishonor anyone or to see them as doing less than their best. But my father he served in the Korean War. He was in Japan at that point. And he feels like he felt like it really helped form him in a vital and powerful way. So he thought going in the military was a great idea. I didn't have quite the same notion. And so one of the steps that I took along the way was to ask who it was okay for me to kill. I heard something just very recently that I thought was amazing about the nuclear codes. You know, the President of the United States has the codes to set off nuclear Armageddon. And someone had the brilliant suggestion, which I'm sure they haven't adopted, but it would, I think it would be a good idea. Said, before the president or anyone in power could release that kind of destruction, you know, if they press the button, so to speak, that it's going to result in millions and millions of deaths. The person said, but we tend to think of those things remotely, distantly. Yeah. I said, what if the codes or the access to the codes were hidden in a pill, and that pill was embedded in someone's heart or right near someone's heart, a dear, trusted, an innocent individual who would always be near the president, such that if the president decided it's time to send the nuclear bombs, that the president would first have to take a knife and cut open this person. Well, the visceral experience of causing blood, causing the death of someone in order to do this, how many of us would hesitate doing that much more so than pushing a button to kill them millions? So I've been led to think so deeply about this, and I've had a number of guests who've enriched my mind and thoughts about it. But of course, having lived in another country and seen the world from a different angle means I see so much less others as other than just myself sitting in another chair.
Mark, I want to ask you something. Whenever I'm speaking with people, I'm always, as I mentioned before we started recording today, there are four kind of ideas or questions that I like to ask, and which kind of steer into my talk. And you've shared the first two beautifully. The first being, kind of turning point or just your awakening experiences, which you talked about, in high school when you started debating, and the 2 years you spent in Togo. And the next question I like to ask is, or talk about the idea of asking for help or feeling supported, and you're beautifully supported by your Quaker community. The third one that we've yet to explore together is those moments where you feel doubt or uncertainty, whatever, and what is it that makes you persist on the path? What is it that makes you continue doing this work? Northern Spirit Radio, both as an activist and someone who realizes the power of music and community. What do you do in those challenging moments where you think, gee, should I still be doing this? Or is it you being in the community, your Quaker community, that encourages you to keep going? Or are there other things that happen that just give you the juice to keep moving in that direction? Any thoughts about that?
Certainly, lots of them. First of all, I have to say that none of this, I think, would have happened, or, maybe I would have had to be 90 before I got around to it, if I didn't have the blessed partnership of Sandra, my wife, my Helpsmeet. And by the way, the name Helpsmeet is the name that we took when we got married.
I so love that name. I have to tell you, before we were to speak today, I just thought, what a perfect name for this one. So I'm delighted to hear that it's something that you consciously chose.
I know I take a lot of detours, but that's the way you get there somewhere. There's so many byways to visit. I believe dramatically in equality, including men and women. And I'm afraid I'll step on people's toes when I say this, but the naming of a joined couple based on the name that a man has from his father strikes me as arbitrary. Mm-hmm. Arbitrary is okay, but arbitrary, and it values that experience of the man and not of the woman. And so when I thought about getting married, I said, well, I wouldn't want to take away a woman's name and her value, that just so they could be replaced by mine. Mm-hmm. A lot of people did hyphenating back then, and I see why one would do that. That's understandable, but it's also cumbersome, and it just puts off the decision making until the next generation. Mm-hmm. Because, Schneider, Jones, Anthony, Roberts, when they come together and have a four-name long, it's not going to work. Yeah. So what I decided on was that I would try and explore the name that my wife and I were called to live under, that would express what our partnership was about. Mm-hmm. And so thought of a lot of different names. One of them, by the way, that Sandra and I passed on, although it called to me, and you've heard already my connection with French. She grew up in a community that was very German, mm-hmm. and we were both very involved in dance and spirit. And so, and the metaphor I like best for the divine is light. So Lumière Tanzen, which is lumière, the French word for light, mm-hmm. Tanzen, the German word for dance. Lumière Tanzen. Wow. What a beautiful name. Oh. And no one would spell it, and it would take forever to write it. And so we passed on that one. Mm-hmm. And Helpsmeet was one of the possibilities. And I had only heard the words before in the writings of George Fox, who was one of the founders of Quakers. It's a word from Old English. I mean, in mid-1600s, it would have been a word that you might use in place of like spouse or something. Right. And actually in the King James Version of the Bible, it would refer to Eve as being the helpsmeet of Adam. Or as George Fox put it, and this is one of the passages that sat in my mind, was he said that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were helpsmeet one to the other in service of the holy things.
Wow. Beautiful.
That was a calling. So I had the most powerful spiritual experience in my life around that, and which point the light let me know that it was okay for me to have Sandra as my helpsmeet. And I was pondering at that point whether to have her as my wife, but it was helpsmeet. It was this peculiar word, which was from 10 years earlier. So long and short of it, what happened was we talked about a lot of names, and Sandra wasn't completely sold on it because it's kind of, in some way, a little bit cumbersome in our language. Mm-hmm. Helpsmeet. Right. Didn't make sense to her until she realized there's a town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan where some rivers come together, uh-huh. and the town at their intersection is called Watersmeet. Watersmeet, Helpsmeet. That's what this is about. And so to go back to your original question and to leave my detour, what I do in the hard times? Well, I wouldn't be on this path if it wasn't for my helpsmeet, for my dear Sandra. Mm-hmm. Supporting me, because it meant I was bringing in less money, certainly starting up, and I'm only now getting up to something that is even minimally survivable. Mm-hmm. So that has been very crucial. My spiritual community, and again, I have a clearness committee as well as being held under the care of a full meeting, and there's a yearly meeting. There's this large community of people who are part of it, who are a great part of making it possible to do this. There are times when I feel discouraged or overworked or tired. I mean, can't get my nap every day, And uh, I currently have a board of directors for Northern Spirit Radio who are right there with us. And by the way, that board of directors, there are a couple members who happen to be Quaker, like I am. One of them is a pastor at a UCC church. David Huber is that. Sandy McKinney is pastor at local Unity Church here in Eau Claire. Mm-hmm. There's one person who is sometimes or somewhat less Catholic, and there's others who are not affiliated with anything. It doesn't matter. So the spiritual support comes from all over, and being united and doing our work in a way that I don't feel alone very often. Mm-hmm. If I do, it's because I'm usually leaving the room, Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the issues with myself. My most alone moments in the world are moments when I left. It's not because other people deserted me.
Yeah, beautifully said. And the last question I'd like to ask, but I think you've been answering this very well too, is just, talking about gratitude for the entire process. I mean, I hear that quite clearly, just how well supported you have been by Sandra, by your community. Just many steps along the way, just getting lots of affirmation that you're exactly where you need to be, which is sweet. And I have very much enjoyed the 2 times that we, did our interview and talked about music, and it's just lovely to be connected to you. And of course, we are all, the surface stuff is just that. I often use the image of, when there's an oil spill, the oil just sits on top of the water. Put down the water is actually pure. So we can get hung up on the top for 3 inches difference, or just look a little bit underneath it and just see the commonality in all things. And, that's just more and more clear to me as time goes on. Mm-hmm. Coming back to Eau Claire.
And one of the other things that I experienced as part of this work, and that I'm grateful for, is there's a great bumper sticker. I don't know if you've ever seen this one. It says, "Change is good. You go first."
That's great.
And there's a lot of us, a large part of us, that does not like change very much. But as a matter of fact, I just printed something out earlier today for a friend who I've talked to about this. I've got to grab it. It's sitting right there.
Yeah. For those of you who are joining us a little late, this is Small Steps, Big Life, and I'm speaking to my friend Mark Helpsmeet, who is based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. And thanks to technology, we can be anywhere these days and have a heart-to-heart connection. So lay it on us, Mark. What do you got?
Okay. This is a person who's trying to sort out what they need to do for their next steps. Uh-huh. And let me see if I can get this a good picture on here. Yes.
Beautiful.
Does that appear forward to everyone else? On my screen, it looks backwards.
It works for me.
And one of the things that it's true, I've described myself as a terminal extrovert, but quite interestingly, doing this, the interviewing that I've been doing, is what I really want to do is hear other people at their core, because that's where the biggest changes and the greatest power is. So what I've found, it's kind of unusual. Today, here with you, Nathan, I'm talking a lot. If you listen to my interviews, my portion of the interview is pretty small. It's conversational. Yeah. It's not just an interrogation. Yeah. But what I've learned best over the past 10 years is listening. Whereas people think of it as perhaps a talking is what I do. No, my job is listening. And so I've been changed in deeper ways to trust, to put a few words out and let other people speak.
Yeah. You and I share that. I have a real love of people, and through processes that I've been involved in, which in past conversations, I realize is also another parallel we share, men's work, etc. Yeah, I've really learned how to be a better listener too, and it's lovely things happen when you give people space to just be who they are.
Yes. I've gotten so enriched by it, and I only hope other people who tune into Northern Spirit Radio or to Small Steps, Big Life, either way, they gather the stories and the essence that people are going through to make the world a better place, make their lives and the world, and they tend to go together.
Absolutely. So what's next, good sir? What's coming up for you? How can people support you in your work, Northern Spirit Radio? Well, first of all, let's get the website. It's northernspiritradio.org. Right?
northernspiritradio.org, and that's ORG. I could have selected COM, and actually COM will get you to website for me. Mm-hmm. But org, organic is better than commercial. Mm. That's an environmental statement on my part. Yes, northernspiritradio.org is how to get there and where we're going. I'm building the network, syndicating wider and wider, and so I'm hoping people will include us in their local radio stations. Of course, people can just listen via my webpage or subscribe via iTunes, and there's an RSS feed in both places, and so people can listen any which way. Mm-hmm. But I think there's real power in people that I told you I was contacted by a group from Bellingham. Right. And there's a group there that are deciding to sponsor my programs on the local radio station that's just starting up there. So there's a community saying, here's a message that I want to see happen on the airwaves in my community. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing. And in part because, again, we can watch things individually via internet. I can pick and choose any item. But there's something about being part of a community decision to watch or see something that is so important. So I'm hoping people say, well, why not in my town? Yes, this would be a helpful thing. So that's happening. But the other thing that's happening as part of what Northern Spirit Radio is becoming, we just transitioned to a new website, and it has a new and easier way for people to be included. And I really want other people's programs to be included on the website because there's so many people doing work like what you're doing that it should be disseminated widely. So I'm looking for people who share the same message, that desire to, through these broadcasts, through story and song and spiritual journey, to make the world a better place, to heal the world. And I want to share those as a central resource. So.
Well, may this show help you to do exactly that.
Yes. Well, I can only just imagine how I got to be so lucky as to have friends like you, Nathan. I mean, really, it's so wonderful to be part of doing work and to run into people doing the work. When I choose good things, like I had this experience when I first became a vegetarian. It put me in contact with other people who were thinking about, feeling about, doing things that made my life richer. So even though I know all the good reasons for being a vegetarian, the main reason I'm a vegetarian still now, 39 years later, is because it made my life richer because of the people I came in contact with. And so when I take a step, I look and see how that changes the world around me. And that affirms me forward, or says, oh, you meant to turn left, didn't you?
There's a professional speaker that I met through my partner, Jana. His name is George Walther. I should get George on for a show. He's just an amazing and incredible man. And I'm grateful to him for many, many things and many insights. But one that he shared with me, which I love sharing, and it just feels like the right time to share with you now, is if ever you're at a point where you're just having a moment of bliss or peace or connection, fulfillment, all those words, and you look around and you say, wow, what did I ever do to deserve this? So the answer is everything.
Yes.
Just love that. It has all led to this moment. So I'm delighted to be a part of your journey, my friend. And yeah, we're all in this together. We all have things to learn from each other. And what I love more and more is the further we go on, the more it's incredibly clear that it's all the same. We all want love. We all want connection. We all want growth. And to celebrate that together.
Well, thank you for bringing it through Small Steps, Big Life, and through your music. You do such beautiful work, and thanks for letting me share my voice today too.
I'm delighted to be able to turn the tables on you in a friendly way, and to give you an opportunity to share your story. You're a wonderful man, and I'm blessed to know you. Thanks, Mark.
It takes one to know one. Wonderful man.
It does. We are mirrors for each other.
Thanks so much, Nathan.
You're welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Small Steps, Big Life. It has been my great pleasure today to speak with my friend Mark Helpsmeet, who is based in Eau Claire, Washington.
Wisconsin.
I'm sorry.
Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Yes. Oops.
The first time I've made that gaffe. Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And Mark is connected he is the heartbeat of Northern Spirit Radio, and his website is northernspiritradio.org. And I will be putting a link show within the next 24 hours on my website and on YouTube. You can watch this conversation again with Mark. I have some others there, and we'll have many more in the days and weeks to come. So I hope you have an absolutely wonderful Christmas season, Mark. And please give our love to Sandra. I look forward to meeting her at some point. She must be an incredible soul. So,
She is. Thank you again so much, Nathan.
very welcome. Love and blessings.
To you too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.